This is my true story. I worked my whole life to give my family a home, food, and comfort. I thought they would care for me when I got old. But one cold night, they handed me a blanket and $20 and told me to leave. I stood outside my own house with nothing but pain in my chest. I didn't cry. I just walked away. They thought I would never survive. But I did more than that. I turned those $20 into a fortune, and what I did next shocked them. Before I tell you how, please comment where you're watching from and subscribe so my story can reach more people. It happened on a rainy night. The sky was dark and the ground was wet. I remember standing near the door, holding my old jacket, waiting for someone to say something kind. But no one did. My son looked at me with cold eyes and said they couldn't take care of me anymore. He handed me $20 and an old blanket. My daughter stood behind him, quiet, not even looking at me. My daughter-in-law crossed her arms and said nothing. The door stayed half open and the wind blew inside. I asked if I could stay one more night until the rain stopped, but my son turned his face away. He said they needed space, that I would be fine on my own. Before I could say anything else, he shut the door. I stood there, staring at the wood, feeling the sound of it echo through my chest. That house was mine once. I built it with my own hands, brick by brick, when I was young and strong. Now, I was outside of it, like a stranger begging to come in. The rain hit my head, my shoulders, my shoes. The blanket they gave me was thin, too small to cover me properly. I didn't know where to go. My pockets were empty except for that $20 bill. My heart was heavy. The people I had raised, fed, and protected all my life had thrown me away like garbage. I didn't even have anger left. Only silence. I walked slowly down the street. The lights from the windows blurred through the rain. Every step felt longer than the last. I passed by the bakery where I used to buy bread for my kids when they were small. The smell of food made my stomach twist. I hadn't eaten since morning. I sat near a wall for a while, trying to think of what to do. The rain didn't stop. My clothes were soaked, my hands shaking from the cold. I saw a small bus stop nearby, empty and dry. I went there, sat on the bench, and wrapped myself with the blanket. It wasn't warm, but it kept the wind off me. I looked at the $20 in my hand again. That was all I had. My whole life, all my work, all my love, reduced to a single bill and a blanket. I thought about all the years I spent working for my family. The times I came home late and tired but still smiled because seeing them happy made everything worth it. The times I skipped meals so they could eat. The times I paid their debts, their school fees, their weddings. Everything I did was for them. And now they had turned their backs on me. I sat awake the whole night, watching cars pass by. The rain slowed down, but the cold didn't. I thought about walking back and knocking on the door again, but pride stopped me. I couldn't beg. Not from people I once called my own. I had nothing left to lose, but I still had my self-respect. When morning came, I stood up slowly. My back hurt, my legs were stiff, and my eyes were red from lack of sleep. I folded the blanket, put it under my arm, and started walking again. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going back to that house. If they wanted me gone, I would go. But I would survive. I would not let their cruelty be the last thing that defined me. That $20 was all I had, but it was also my beginning. I didn't know it then, but that small bill would become the seed of something much bigger. They thought they had ended my story that night. What they didn't know was that they had just started it. That first night on the street was the hardest night of my life. I had no roof, no bed, and no one to talk to. I found an old bridge near the bus station. The ground underneath was damp, but it kept the rain off me. I spread the blanket they gave me and sat on it, pulling it tight around my shoulders. The sound of cars above me echoed all night. I was tired, but I couldn't sleep. I looked at the $20 in my pocket again and again. It didn't seem like much, but it was all I had. I thought about using it to buy a ticket somewhere far away, but then I realized I had nowhere to go. I had no friends left, no relatives who cared. Everyone I had helped before had forgotten me. I had to survive on my own. By morning, my stomach was empty and my clothes were still wet. I walked to a nearby store and bought a small loaf of bread and a bottle of water. It cost almost half of what I had. I sat on the curb and ate slowly, saving every bite. People walked by, some looked at me, most didn't. I felt invisible. The street was noisy and full of strangers. I saw other people sleeping under bridges, some with torn clothes, some with nothing at all. I realized I wasn't alone in my struggle. That thought gave me a strange kind of strength. If they could keep going, maybe I could too. I spent the rest of the day walking. My legs hurt, but I kept moving. I looked for signs of work, any small job that could give me food or shelter. No one wanted to hire an old man with dirty clothes and tired eyes. I didn't blame them. I just kept walking until the sun went down. When night came, I went back under the same bridge. The wind was stronger this time. I pulled the blanket tighter and tried to think of good memories. My children when they were young, my wife before she passed, the smell of the kitchen when the family used to eat together. The memories hurt, but they kept me warm inside. I made a promise to myself that night. I said I would not die on the street. I didn't know how, but I would stand again. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted to prove that I could still live, that I could still rise from nothing. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. My body ached, but my mind was clear. I looked around and saw a man sweeping the parking lot of a small store. I watched him work for a while. He looked tired too, but he was earning his food. That was when I decided I had to do the same. I went from one shop to another, asking if they needed help. Most said no. Some didn't even answer. But I didn't stop asking. Finally, a mechanic at a small garage told me to come back the next day. He said maybe I could sweep the floor or clean tools. It wasn't much, but it was something. That night I sat under the bridge again, but this time I felt hope. I ate the last piece of my bread, drank water, and folded the $20 bill carefully. I told myself that tomorrow would be different. I had a chance, and I wasn't going to waste it. When morning came, I got up, washed my face at a public tap, and walked to the garage. I didn't look back at the bridge. I was done sleeping under it. I didn't know it then, but that small step would be the beginning of everything that followed. I went back to the garage early the next morning. The mechanic was already there, cleaning his tools. He looked at me and nodded. "You can start sweeping," he said. That was all I needed to hear. I picked up the broom and got to work. The floor was covered in dust, oil, and broken parts. I swept every corner until it was clean. My back hurt, but I didn't stop. I wanted to show that I could work, even if I was old. When I finished, the mechanic gave me a few dollars and said I could come again the next day. It wasn't much, but it was the first money I had earned since my family threw me out. I felt proud, even though my hands were shaking from hunger. I used part of it to buy a small meal and saved the rest. Each day after that, I came to the shop early and left late. I swept, cleaned tools, washed parts, and helped move boxes. Slowly, the mechanic started trusting me. He began asking me to hand him tools, then to help with small repairs. I watched him closely, learned how things worked, and tried to do everything right. I still slept under the bridge at night, but things were different now. I had a routine. I had work. The fear of being useless was gone. I no longer thought about my family when I went to bed. I thought about the next day, about what I could do better. Sometimes when the shop closed, I stayed back a little longer to wipe down the tools. I liked the quiet sound of the metal, the smell of oil. It reminded me that I was still alive, still capable of learning. I realized I wasn't broken. I was just starting over. Weeks passed, and I managed to save enough for a second-hand shirt and a pair of shoes. It felt good to look decent again. The mechanic noticed and smiled at me one morning. He said I worked harder than most young men he hired. That was the first kind word I had heard in months. One day, a customer came to fix his car and needed it done fast. The mechanic was busy, so I offered to help. He let me try, and I managed to fix a small problem by myself. The customer was surprised. He gave me a tip. It wasn't much, but it felt like the world to me. That small act of trust changed everything. After that, the mechanic gave me more responsibilities. He started paying me a little more too. I worked hard, saved every cent I could. I still ate once a day, but I didn't mind. I wanted to build something again, even if it started small. At night, when I counted my money, I thought about how far I had come since the day they threw me out. I no longer hated them. I just didn't think about them. My heart was too full of new goals to waste time on old pain. Within a few months, I had enough money to rent a small room. It was tiny, with one bed, one chair, and one window. But to me, it was a palace. It had walls, a roof, and a door I could lock. I didn't need a blanket from anyone anymore. I cooked simple meals and went to work every day. I didn't have many things, but I had peace. And that was something money couldn't buy before. The mechanic soon told me he wanted to teach me more about fixing cars properly. He said he saw potential in me. I learned fast. Every night, I read about engines and repairs from old manuals I found at the library. I wanted to be better, not just for money, but for myself. I wanted to prove that I could rise again, that I wasn't finished. That was how it started, with a broom, a blanket, and $20. The beginning was small, but it gave me something my family couldn't, a reason to keep going. I worked at the garage every single day without missing one. The days were long, and my hands were always covered in grease, but I didn't mind. I was learning, earning, and growing. Every car I fixed gave me pride. Every coin I saved gave me hope. I stopped thinking about what I lost and started focusing on what I could build. After a few months, the mechanic who first gave me work told me that I was now more skilled than most of the younger workers. He raised my pay a little and trusted me with bigger jobs. I fixed engines, changed parts, and learned how to talk to customers. I started to see myself not as a man who was thrown away, but as someone with purpose again. I lived in my small rented room and saved almost everything I earned. I ate once a day, mostly rice and bread, and drank water instead of tea to save a few extra dollars. Every week, I put a small amount of money in an envelope and kept it under my mattress. Watching it grow gave me strength. People at the shop started respecting me. They came to me for help when something was too complicated. The owner began asking for my advice on repairs. It made me feel useful again. I was no longer just the old man who swept floors. I was part of the team. After 1 full year, I had saved enough to move into a slightly better room. It had a proper bed, a window that let sunlight in, and a small table where I could eat and write. I bought myself a radio and listened to music at night. It wasn't much, but it was peace. I smiled more. I slept better. One afternoon, a man came into the garage with his car broken down badly. None of the workers wanted to take the job because it looked too difficult. I decided to try. I worked on that car for 2 full days. I didn't sleep much, but I didn't stop. When the engine finally started, the man looked amazed. He shook my hand and paid double. That moment reminded me that hard work still meant something. The owner of the garage called me to his office a few days later. He told me that if I kept working like this, he wanted to make me a partner. I couldn't believe it. He said he needed someone he could trust to manage the work when he was away. I accepted immediately. I started handling customers, managing small orders, and taking care of the workers. The garage began earning more. I made sure to treat everyone kindly because I knew how it felt to be ignored. People liked working with me. Soon, the business grew faster than we expected. After 2 years, I was able to buy my first small share in the company. I didn't tell anyone. I just kept working harder. The money I earned from that investment made my savings grow faster. I was finally stable again. I didn't need charity, and I didn't need pity. I sometimes passed by my old neighborhood. I saw my family's house from far away. I never went close. I just looked at it for a moment and kept walking. The pain wasn't gone, but it no longer controlled me. I was becoming someone new, stronger, calmer, wiser. I reminded myself every day that I started with $20 and a blanket. That memory kept me humble. It reminded me where I came from and why I would never treat anyone the way my family treated me. By the end of the 3rd year, I was no longer poor. I wasn't rich yet, but I could finally say I lived with dignity. I had enough to help others, so I started giving small meals to homeless people on weekends. I never told them my story. I just smiled and handed out food. They didn't need to know how far I had come. It was enough that I understood their pain. That was my climb. slow, steady, honest. Every scar on my hands became proof that I had rebuilt myself from nothing. I wasn't done yet. I still had bigger dreams. Dreams I didn't even know would come true sooner than I thought. Life started changing faster than I expected. I was now part of the garage, not just a worker. I managed customers, handled orders, and trained new workers. The business grew, and I grew with it. I woke up every day before sunrise and went to sleep after midnight. Hard work became my habit, and I never complained. One afternoon, a customer came with a broken luxury car. No one in the garage wanted to touch it because it was too complicated. I decided to try. I spent 2 full days studying its engine, looking through manuals, and testing each part carefully. When I finally fixed it, the customer was shocked. He said I had saved him thousands. He paid a large amount and told others about our garage. That repair changed everything. In the following months, more rich clients came to us because of my work. The garage started making good profit. My boss was so happy that he told me I deserved a share of the business. He made me his partner officially. My name was printed on the company board. I still remember standing in front of that sign, my hands shaking, thinking about how I once slept under a bridge with nothing. I saved more money and started thinking bigger. I knew cars well now, not just how to fix them, but how to buy and sell them. I used my savings to buy one old car, fixed it myself, and sold it for a small profit. I repeated the process again and again. Each time I made a little more. Within 2 years, I had enough to open a small second garage of my own. I didn't decorate it or buy fancy tools. I just focused on good work and honest service. Customers started trusting me because I treated them fairly. They came back again and again. I trained young workers like family. I made sure no one felt small the way I once did. By the 5th year, I owned 3 garages across the city. People called me Sir now. I wore clean clothes, drove a car, and lived in a good apartment. But I never forgot how it all began. That $20 bill stayed in my wallet all those years. It reminded me of where I came from and what I survived. One morning, a journalist came to my main garage to write about local business success stories. He asked about my life, and I told him everything. How I started with nothing, how I was thrown out, how I built everything from scratch. He looked amazed. A few days later, my story was published in the newspaper. People recognized me in the market and on the street. I got calls from banks, investors, and suppliers offering business partnerships. But I stayed humble. I said no to anything that didn't feel right. I wasn't chasing fame. I was chasing peace. And I finally had it. Then one evening, while reading the paper, I saw something that made my heart skip. It was a small advertisement. My old family home, the same house I built years ago, was listed for sale. The one where I was thrown out with $20 and a blanket. I stared at that ad for a long time. My hands started shaking, but not from anger. It felt like fate was calling me. I called the real estate agent and asked for the price. It was expensive, but I had enough to pay. I didn't tell anyone. I just made an appointment to visit the property the next morning. That night, I couldn't sleep. Memories of that house came back. The sound of my children's laughter, the warmth of my wife's cooking, the night they shut the door on me. I realized this was my chance, not for revenge, but for closure. I had turned $20 into a fortune. I had turned pain into power. Now, I was going to walk back into the same house, not as the man they threw out, but as the man who owned it again. The day I signed the papers for that old house was the day I realized how much I had changed. The man who once begged for shelter was now buying the very place he was thrown out of. I walked into the lawyer's office wearing a clean suit and polished shoes. My hands no longer shook from cold or hunger. They were steady, strong, and sure. I signed my name on every page without hesitation. It was the same name my family once laughed at. Now it was the name that owned everything. After the deal was done, I drove to the house. It looked smaller than I remembered, but it was still beautiful. The paint was old, the walls needed repair, and the garden was dry. But to me, it was perfect. I stood in front of it for a long time, remembering the night I left with only $20 and a blanket. My eyes filled with tears, but not from sadness. It was relief. I had survived everything that was meant to break me. When I walked through the gate, the neighbors noticed. Some came out, shocked to see me again. They remembered how I was thrown out. Now they saw me step out of a car, clean, calm, successful. Their faces showed respect, something I hadn't seen in years. I didn't smile or brag. I just walked quietly toward the door. Inside, the room smelled the same. The walls held both pain and memories. I touched the corner of the living room where my kids used to play. I saw the old marks on the door where I had measured their height every year. Everything was still there. The house had changed owners, but it had never stopped being mine in spirit. I spent the next few days repairing the place. I hired workers to fix the roof, repaint the walls, and clean every corner. I made sure everything looked new again. I didn't want to erase the past. I just wanted to rebuild it better. As I watched the workers paint the walls, I realized I had done the same with my life. I had painted over pain with patience and turned loss into strength. When the renovation was done, I stood in the middle of the living room, alone. The silence felt peaceful now, not empty. I looked around and whispered to myself, "You did it." It wasn't pride. It was closure. The same walls that had once heard me being told to leave now stood under my name again. I invited no one to visit. I didn't call my family to show them what I had done. I didn't need their approval anymore. I had spent too many years trying to earn love that was never real. Now I was at peace with myself. The news of me buying the house spread quickly. People talked. Some said I was lucky. Others said I must have found help from someone rich. No one knew the truth, that every dollar came from my own work, from every car I fixed, from every long day I endured without complaining. I didn't explain it to anyone. I let the truth speak through my actions. A week later, I sat outside on the porch during the evening. The air was cool, and the sunset looked beautiful. For the first time in years, I felt like I was home again. Not because I bought the house, but because I had earned it twice, once with love and once with struggle. That night I slept in the same room I once left with nothing but a blanket. The bed was soft, the lights were warm, and I felt no anger, no sadness, only quiet satisfaction. Life had come full circle. I had walked away with nothing, and now I had everything I needed. The transformation wasn't about money. It was about respect, dignity, and peace. I didn't just change my life. I changed the meaning of my pain. The man who once stood outside this house in the rain was gone. The man who stood inside it now had weathered every storm and still stood tall. A few months after I bought the house, something unexpected happened. A large company reached out to me. They had heard about my small garages and wanted me to take care of their vehicle maintenance contracts. It was a big offer, more work, more responsibility, and more trust. I sat quietly after the meeting, thinking about how life had turned. Just a few years ago, I was begging for work, and now big companies were asking for my help. I accepted the contract. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I wasn't afraid of work. I hired more people, trained them carefully, and made sure every job was done right. I spent long hours in each garage, checking everything myself. My workers respected me because I treated them with kindness. I never shouted, never looked down on anyone. I knew what it felt like to be small. The company was pleased with our work. They renewed the contract again and again. Soon, other businesses followed. Within a year, I had more work than I could handle. I opened a fourth garage to keep up. I didn't celebrate or buy luxury things. I saved every dollar and invested it wisely. My goal wasn't to show off. My goal was to build something that could never be taken away again. Sometimes I still passed by the street where I once slept under the bridge. The same spot was there, the same cold concrete, the same noise. I stood there one evening, just looking. I remembered the rain, the hunger, the pain. It felt like another lifetime. I whispered a quiet thank you to myself, because that broken man under the bridge was the reason I became who I am now. Then, one afternoon, I saw a name I knew in the newspaper. It was my son's. The house next to mine, their house, was being listed for sale. The same family that threw me out years ago was now losing their home. The irony wasn't lost on me. Life has a strange way of teaching lessons. I didn't feel happy or proud, I just felt quiet. I called the real estate agent again. When he told me the asking price, I didn't bargain, I simply said I'd take it. He seemed surprised. He didn't know why I wanted that house, but I knew. It was the same house where I had once stood outside, wet and hungry, waiting for mercy that never came. A week later, the deal was ready. My son and his family came to sign their part. When they walked in and saw me sitting there, their faces went pale. They looked at each other, unsure of what to say. I didn't speak first. I just signed the papers calmly and handed them to the agent. The silence in that room said more than words ever could. My son looked at me, his eyes full of shame. My daughter couldn't meet my gaze. The woman who once told me to leave stood still, her hands trembling. I didn't gloat. I didn't remind them of what they did. I just took the keys and stood up. After the signing, I walked to the door and paused. I turned to them and said softly, "You left me with $20. I used it well." Then I stepped outside. I didn't look back. That day, I didn't just buy a house. I bought my freedom, my peace, my closure. The opportunity life gave me wasn't about money. It was about dignity. I proved that even when people throw you away, you can still rise higher than they ever imagined. When I returned home that night, I sat in my chair, holding the keys. I thought about everything: the pain, the hunger, the long nights, the slow climb, the small victories. I realized that life had finally come full circle. The door that was once shut in my face was now open, and I walked through it on my own terms. The day I returned to their old house was quiet. The air felt heavy, but my heart was calm. I drove there alone, no driver, no crowd, no noise. I didn't need anyone to see me. I just wanted to finish what life had started years ago. When I parked in front of the gate, memories hit me like a wave. I remembered standing there with rain falling on my face, holding a blanket and $20. That night had broken me once, but this time, I stood straight. I wasn't the same man anymore. I had built my life again, piece by piece, with my own hands. The house looked the same from outside, the same color, the same windows, the same gate. But it didn't feel like their home anymore. It felt like mine. I stepped out of the car and looked around. Some of the neighbors saw me and stopped what they were doing. They recognized me. Their eyes widened, full of surprise. They had seen me when I was thrown out. Now they were seeing me come back as the owner. I walked up to the door and knocked. My son opened it. The moment he saw me, his face froze. His wife came behind him, and her eyes widened. My daughter stood at the end of the hallway, silent, holding her child. No one spoke. The only sound was the ticking of a wall clock. I stepped inside slowly. Every part of the house felt both familiar and strange. The furniture was different, the walls painted in new colors, but the air was still heavy with memories. I looked at the floor where I had once stood begging for one more night. It felt strange to stand in the same place again, this time as the man who owned it. The real estate agent arrived with the papers and greeted me politely. I sat down at the table and signed the final documents. The house was officially mine. My son sat across from me, pale and nervous. His wife tried to smile but couldn't. I didn't look at them much. I just focused on the papers. When the agent left, the room went quiet again. My son finally tried to speak, but no words came out. My daughter whispered my name, but her voice cracked. I didn't answer. I didn't come to argue or punish them. I came for peace. I wanted to close the circle that started on the night they pushed me out. I looked around one last time and stood up. I walked toward the door and paused. I turned to face them, and for the first time in many years, I felt no anger, only truth. I said, "You left me with $20. I turned it into a life. Now I own this house." My voice was steady, calm, simple. They stared at me, speechless. I walked out of the door slowly. The air outside felt lighter. The same gate that once closed in my face now opened for me. I stepped through it, got into my car, and drove away. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. That chapter was over. As I drove home, I thought about everything I had gone through. The rain, the hunger, the work, the long nights, the loneliness, the rebuilding. Every pain had led me to this moment. I didn't win because of luck. I won because I refused to give up. When I reached my new house, I sat down quietly and looked out the window. The sky was clear and the sunset was soft. I smiled, not out of pride, but out of peace. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. The man they threw away had built something they could never imagine. I realized that sometimes life doesn't need revenge to balance itself. It just needs time. Time had done the work for me. I came back not to hurt them, but to show that no matter how hard they tried to break me, I would always stand again. That night, after buying their house and walking away, I sat alone in my living room for a long time. The lights were off, and the silence filled the room. I looked at my hands, the same hands that once shook in the rain, now steady and strong. I realized how much a person can change when life gives them pain instead of comfort. Pain teaches more than love ever does. I thought about my son, about the day he gave me $20 and told me to leave. I remembered the sound of that door closing. Back then, it felt like the world had ended. But now, I saw it differently. That door closing wasn't the end of my life. It was the beginning of my new one. I realized that if they had not thrown me out, I would never have learned how strong I truly was. I would have stayed the same, dependent, quiet, weak. But the streets, the hunger, the loneliness, they changed me. They built me. They gave me something my family never could, resilience. As I sat there, I also understood something else. Forgiveness doesn't mean you forget what happened. It means you stop letting it control you. I had carried that pain for years, thinking that one day I would show them what I had become. But now that I didn't feel proud or angry. I just felt free. Money didn't make me free. Respect did. Self-respect. The knowledge that I built everything from nothing gave me peace. I had earned every brick, every meal, every piece of comfort in my life. No one could take that from me again. When I looked around my house, I realized I didn't need anything else. I had enough. Enough food, enough comfort, enough peace. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. Happiness doesn't come from revenge or wealth. It comes from surviving with your dignity still intact. The next morning, I went for a walk around the neighborhood. The sun was soft, and the streets were quiet. Some of the neighbors waved at me, smiling politely. They knew what had happened, but I didn't care what they thought. I wasn't walking to prove anything. I was walking because I could, because I had my health, my will, and my peace. I stopped in front of my old house one last time. The curtains were closed, and the front yard looked empty. I wondered what they were feeling now. Maybe shame, maybe regret, maybe nothing at all. But it didn't matter. Their silence couldn't hurt me anymore. For years, I wanted to hear them say, sorry. But that morning, I realized I didn't need it. Their apology wouldn't change the past, and it wouldn't add anything to my life. I had already healed. The real victory wasn't buying the house. It was walking past it with no pain left in my heart. I turned around and went back home. When I reached my gate, I stopped for a moment and smiled. The old me would have stood outside hoping for someone to open the door. The new me held the key in his hand. That was my realization, that life doesn't always give justice in loud ways. Sometimes it gives quiet moments where you finally breathe without anger. I wasn't the man they threw away. I was the man who rose again, not to prove them wrong, but to prove myself right. I sat down with a cup of tea and looked out the window. The sunlight hit the floor and the room felt warm. I didn't feel old anymore. I felt alive. My story wasn't about being thrown away. It was about finding strength in the place where I was broken. Justice did not come with anger. It came quietly, like morning light. I didn't have to shout. I didn't have to fight. Life had already done everything for me. The people who once called me useless had watched me rise without their help. That was enough. I didn't want revenge. I wanted peace. I wanted to live the rest of my days without hate in my heart. But still, deep inside, I knew what justice looked like. It wasn't about making them suffer. It was about proving that kindness and hard work always win, even when the world turns its back on you. I kept both houses. I didn't sell them. I didn't throw anyone out. I let time show them what they had done. My family stayed quiet. They couldn't meet my eyes when we crossed paths in the neighborhood. They looked smaller, not because they had lost money, but because they had lost respect. Sometimes I saw my son walking alone. He had aged faster than me. He used to be proud and loud, but now he walked with his head down. I didn't feel happy seeing that. I just felt sad that life had to teach him this way. One afternoon, he came to see me. He stood at my gate for a long time before I noticed him. When I walked out, he said nothing. His eyes were full of tears, his lips shaking. I didn't say a word either. I just nodded. He understood that I had forgiven him. We didn't need to talk about the past anymore. He left quietly, and I went back inside. I sat in my chair and looked around my home. It was peaceful. The air felt clean, calm, still. I realized that I had done what few people can do. I turned pain into power without turning my heart dark. That was real justice. I spent my evenings helping people who reminded me of my past. I gave food to men who lived on the streets, blankets to those who slept under bridges, and work to anyone willing to try. I didn't do it for fame or thanks. I did it because I knew what it felt like to be hungry, to be forgotten. I wanted to give them the chance I once needed. Every time I helped someone, I felt lighter. I realized that the best kind of justice is not payback, it's compassion. To rise above what hurt you and still choose to be good, that is strength. That is victory. Sometimes I sat outside on the porch and watched the sunset. I thought about that rainy night long ago when I was left with $20 and a blanket. I smiled at the memory, not with bitterness, but with peace. Because without that night, I wouldn't be who I am today. I had lost everything once, and I built it all back, not to prove them wrong, but to prove myself right. I showed that no matter how deep life pushes you down, you can stand again. You just have to believe in yourself when no one else does. Now, I live quietly. I don't need noise, attention, or praise. I wake up early, drink tea, walk through the garden, and thank God for every breath I take. I'm not rich because of money. I'm rich because I have peace. The people who once threw me away now live in regret. I don't visit them, but I don't hate them either. I hope they find their own peace one day, the way I found mine. This is my justice. Not revenge, not pride, just the calm knowledge that I turned $20 into a fortune, loneliness into strength, and humiliation into honor. When people ask me how I did it, I always say the same thing. I never gave up. I believed that one day, the same life that broke me would reward me for not quitting. And it did.